I am so excited to talk with Bree from Brighten Made today. I feel like I've been following you for forever, probably. Yeah, and I'm just so excited to talk with you. So let's start with an icebreaker question. So if you were not a graphic designer, what job do you think you would have?
Oh
I feel
gosh.
like I know the answer to this question, but
Um,
I wanted to
probably
ask.
probably an interior designer. I don't know if that still counts because it's technically a designer, but just in a different, like it's a totally different field. Um, so yeah, probably an interior designer. I feel like I would be my second pick. In college though, like when I had to apply for design school, my backup career, if I didn't get into graphic design, was interior design. And then it was like every like single design major possible. And then if I didn't get into design school at all, it was going to be accounting, which looking at now is really funny because that's like something I'm horrible at in my business. So yeah, probably interior design or some sort of like something involved with like home decor. Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's what I was gonna like guess would be your answer because obviously I feel like at least your Instagram has become like half design, half interiors because obviously, I mean, I would imagine it's just been like a huge part of your life with having
Yes,
your
for
new
sure.
house and wanting to decorate everything. So, yeah,
Oh.
I mean, I feel like it would be interesting if somehow you could have that also be part of your business, but that would be a lot to do.
I know, like that's the thing, because I've always thought about that because people will ask me like, well, can you help me with my room or something? And I'd be like, well, I'm not an interior designer. Like I feel very like not qualified to ever help anyone. And I don't necessarily want to work for clients with that because I actually, when I was going to school and I was trying to decide if I was going to do graphic design or interior design, my mom took me to like one of those counselors that tells you like what you should do with your life. I don't know if you've heard of them, but essentially they like read your personality and like tell you what you'd be a good fit for. And she said right off the bat, because I was like dead set on interior design, she's like, you would not do well with interior design because it's so specific and you would only like to design in your style. You wouldn't like to design in other people's styles, which is pretty true. But I feel like that's also pretty similar with graphic design, but maybe because it's more broad.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's when I was like, well, I don't know like if there's a huge job market for that. Like I feel like with graphic design, you can like right out of college, there's just so many different jobs in like industries you can work in versus interior design. I would probably really only want to do residential. So that like cuts out half of the like
Yeah.
industry. And so anyways, but yeah, no, it is still a passion of mine, but I would like, if I ever incorporated it, I feel like it would be something with like home decor, but less of like one-on-one service.
I would love to hear more about how you started your business, Brighten Made, and kind of like, when did you figure out you wanted to be a designer and when did you decide you wanted to have your own business? Because those are very different things. So yeah, how did all of that happen?
Yeah. So I've always been interested in like art and design, just like ever since I was a little kid. I would help my mom like rearrange her house and like cut things out of magazines. And then when MySpace became popular, like I was obsessed with redoing my MySpace layouts.
Yes,
And that's when
me
I started to
too.
learn a little bit of like CSS and like anyways. But yeah, that's when I like knew I loved like all of that. And so um I went to school for graphic design and then because I had kind of decided to like go down the graphic design route rather than interior design, but I ended up right out of college getting a job for Better Homes and Gardens magazine, which is local to where I live. And I was super excited because I'm like, this is my dream job. It combines both graphic, editorial design and like home design essentially and like lifestyle stuff. But like a few weeks into working there, I was just like, this is just not creatively fulfilling at all. It's not like the dream job that I thought it was. And so about 6 months in, I finally was like, I see all these people like on Instagram. It started to become, I think, popular for people to like have their own businesses. Like it was right around that time, I feel like. I'm like, I just don't understand like how people actually like make money on their own. Like, I just don't know how I would ever be able to do that. And so long story short, I ended up meeting a friend at the job, and we together, she's actually a copywriter. And so we ended up starting a wedding paper goods company called Flyover Design Co. And that was when I first like, I don't know, explore this whole idea of like working for myself. Loved it. Like it became like my baby. But then like we were both in different stages in our lives. And so she was older than me and was like having children, and I was, you know, still fresh out of college and not married yet. And so I knew it wasn't going to be something that was ever going to be able to support me long term. And I also knew that I was really interested in branding, but I had no real branding experience aside from just like college. Like I never worked at like an agency. All of my internships were always editorial. And so, and we were getting some requests for like logo design and stuff like that through our like small little design studio, even though we mostly did like wedding stationery. So then I kind of started taking those on my own. And then I realized I was like, well, what if I started another company that does branding? And people thought I was insane because I'm like working a full-time job. And then I had the other like side hustle. And then I started Brighten Made. But I just knew like in my head, like I was like, I just feel like this paper goods company is probably not going to be sustainable forever. And just like working with a partner, I think has its own challenges. And I just kind of wanted to do like my own thing. And at that point, I feel like I got the confidence of like running a business like successfully somewhat, that I could just like do that on my own. Cause I think it's really challenging to like, I don't know, put stuff out like when it's just you. Like it's very scary, especially in the beginning. Whereas like when I had a partner, I felt way less pressure because you have someone to like mess up with you and like just like take chances with you. And so I feel like that was definitely like, while like looking back, like obviously I don't do anything with that business now, like, you know, but, and part of me is like, well, I kind of wasted all this time like building an Instagram following on that account. And, but it's like in reality though, it totally gave me a lot of just the tools of working with brides and like how that translated into like my business that I do now. So yeah, that's kind of the roundabout way, but I feel like I always knew I wanted to work for myself. I just like had no idea how that would ever become possible. And so then when I started Brighten Made, I slowly like built up some clients just like from Instagram, but really it was very slow to start. Like I feel like with the paper goods company, it was super easy to get clients right away because we were both young. Our friends were getting married and their friends are getting married. And so like, it was just a natural, easy thing to be like, oh, well, I can just design your wedding invitations. But with business owners, I was like, I don't know where they're at. Like, how do I find them and how do I attract them? And that took a while. That took a lot longer than I thought. And I felt like I almost was like, well, this isn't going to work because like nobody, like I'm posting on Instagram and no one's like paying attention. But slowly over time, like it definitely picked up. And then I was able to leave my full-time job because I had so much work with Brighten Made. And then like once I quit my job, I was like, okay, I hate having two businesses. It's so stressful. And like Brighten Made was the one that like, that was the reason why I was able to leave my job, not the other company. And so slowly that year kind of like dissolved working with that partnership and just focused on Brighten Made. And plus too, like I think when I first like quit my job, like I was so used to having like a steady paycheck from like 9 to 5, but then like all of my freelance money was like side cash. So it was like fun money. Whereas when I left my job, I was like, but no, like my time is my money now. Like I'm not just getting paid to like sit at a computer, you know what I mean? And so I was just more stressed about like my time and how that was like going to make it sure that like I was able to like pay my bills and all the things. But yeah, kind of a weird story. I feel like not a ton of people know that I had another company before this, but I feel like entrepreneurship is just this weird, like windy path. It's not linear at all.
Yeah, no, I feel like I had seen you mention like on Instagram or something that you did have a different business, but I didn't know the details. So that's really interesting to hear. And yeah, crazy that I always admire people who go from having a, a full-time job and like transition into freelancing that way, because I I just had to jump right into it after college, and that brought its own challenges. But whenever I think of having to go from having that steady paycheck to, you know, relying on clients to show up and you having to constantly market yourself all the time, it's just like, in my head, that seems so much more difficult than what I did, because then you have to like worry about the money a bit more, I think. And so
Yeah.
was that really hard for you? I would imagine if I had had to do that, because I know in the early days I was not charging enough for what I did, and I would imagine like if you're kind of treating it as like a side thing, you probably don't charge really what's fair. And so then of course when you jump to doing it full time, did you have to like all of a sudden raise your prices because you're like, oh man, now I have to support myself?
Yeah, like I will say though, I do think it's really cool that you were able to like just go into it straight out of college. Although I would be so scared because like I said, I feel like I learned so much from like having another business to then like putting it into what I have now. But yeah, so I definitely had to increase my pricing quite a bit. But I also kind of like figured out in my head, like, okay, realistically, I need this much money per month to like make what I was making at my full-time job. And if I do that, like factoring in like taxes and all the things, and if I do that, that means I need to book this many clients per month. And so I kind of had figured that out in my head, like of what I needed to do to make it work. But then as like, I feel like the first year I went freelance, I probably increased my pricing like 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you do that a lot very early on where you're just like, and I'm increasing it again. But the plus side to doing that was that I was then like, I didn't really like change my number of clients. I still kept it kind of the same. But I also didn't know like how many clients I could realistically have in the beginning because everything I was doing was like on the side, not full time.
Mm-hmm.
But just kind of knowing that, and then being like the plus side of like charging more was then I was able to make even more money than what I had at my full-time job. But I was also just so nervous that I wasn't going to be able to do it. Like my parents, or my dad specifically, I remember him saying like, well, I hope that you realize like what you're doing, you're leaving a steady paycheck. And I'm like it
That's
was just so
encouraging.
stressful. Yes. And they're so supportive now, but like he has like just motivated me. And I feel like he's done that my whole life, like just always kind of pushed me. And I feel like that kind of like just drove me to like say yes to every single project in the beginning and like make sure that I could like make ends meet. But definitely also not like the healthiest way to go about it either. So, but I just wanted to be like sure that like I didn't have to go back to that job because I was like, that just would be the worst possible like outcome. Like realistically, yes, it was a fine job, but like it wasn't creative for me and it just was not fulfilling. And the thought of like having to work for someone else, I just was like, I will do anything, like whatever I have to do to prove myself. So
Yeah. And I know like early on I had a freelance job where I worked with a magazine. So I did some editorial
oh yes,
stuff
I
and like,
remember that.
and it is stressful. Like I don't know what it was like for you, but and I was working with like a small magazine. So it was a very small team, and I was basically doing all of the design for the full magazine. And it was awesome because I always thought working at a magazine used to be like my dream job. Like that's what I thought I
Yes.
really want to do, because I love layouts and like
Yes.
all the technical stuff of figuring out layouts. But oh my gosh, it was a lot because it's just like so many moving parts. That's why now I feel like now that I just have full control over like a whole project, it just feels so much better than me having to think, okay, we have the editor who's going to be reviewing this, we have the photographers that we're waiting for them to send us the pictures, and then like the photo editor. I don't know, it was just like, was it like that for you? Was it just like everything's on a tight deadline all the time?
Yes, and especially like, so I worked at obviously one of the bigger magazines at the place, but I had
Mm-hmm.
also interned for some of the smaller magazines. So like the plus side to working on the smaller magazines was that you did get, I feel like you got to design more.
Yeah.
But on the bigger magazines, like it was cooler because I was like, well, this is like a really like big publication. But I had like 18 people reviewing every little thing that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then working with, yeah, like copy editors, which I think has also helped me a lot with getting copy from clients because, especially with websites, like that is a whole thing now.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think the thing that I actually loved the most was the art direction and like working with a photographer. So I didn't get to do that early on because I mostly just did like layouts. But then as I kind of grew, because I worked there for like 2.5 years. So towards the end, I got promoted to an art director. And so I was able to kind of like conceptualize like different like shots and like
Mm-hmm.
work with a photographer on like, the lighting and like arranging them and all of that. And so that was like my favorite part of the job.
Yeah.
And that's like the main thing that I feel like I would want to do more of now. Although props and everything is just like a whole other area that's just kind of overwhelming. But yeah, no, it was definitely like we had to pitch every single idea to the editor in chief and to the creative director and to my boss. Like I would have to pitch it to my boss before I pitched it to all of them. And it was just a very like corporate environment. So I remember I would just get so nervous because I was the youngest one on the staff and everyone knew that. And it just was like, you just felt like kind of worthless, if that makes sense. Like you just didn't feel like
Mm-hmm.
nobody, and that's just kind of, I think, corporate like world, like you have to work there for 15 years to ever be like successful. And I just was
Mm-hmm.
like, that is so stupid. I'm not going to sit here and wait around until I can finally like be the one making the decisions. Like, I don't know. It was just, it didn't make sense to me. And I also felt like I was doing a lot of I was a quicker designer because I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I first started working there, I was like, what is everyone working on? Like, I'm bored. Like, so give me more work to do. But then I ended up doing like half the magazine. And because people, like, I think who are higher up were maybe in more meetings than me. But yeah, it was just weird because I think my like pace at designing, because like I feel like maybe it's just because I was younger and I knew like the programs better or something. I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's just like a natural thing too for like younger designers to maybe be a little bit faster with that sort of thing. So it just was like I almost ended up getting more work and then didn't get a raise for it. And I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why am I doing more work then? So yeah, I didn't really love how like my work didn't equal my worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because even though I had to start freelancing so early, originally my plan was to go work in an agency or yeah, like try to work in a magazine or something because I just that seemed like the place that I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be, and it also just seemed like the right career path that you're supposed to take. But now looking back, like I know that I would hate it if I was in
You
that type of
would.
situation because, like you said, it is especially if you're at a bigger place, there are so many opinions being
Mm-hmm.
put on like whatever you create and stuff just being picked apart. So it is such a difference between our roles that we have now where we're working with clients and they're coming to us saying you tell me what is right and what I
Yes.
need to do. Like we're in the expert role and whenever you're working in a big agency, unless you're creative director and you, like you said, you've been there for years and years and years, you just don't really get that, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can't imagine working in that type of environment now that I'm so used to having
Totally.
the
I
control.
think it's also made me like anytime I have like a not good client experience or something like bad goes wrong, I just have to remind myself of like those days when I was working there. And I'm like, I would
Mm-hmm.
still rather be doing this.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, like creative directors can like tell you what to do. At one point she would design behind my back or like tell me
Mm.
to like move. And I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is how I know this is not going to be like forever. But at least I like if I remember that and then I tell my like think about like maybe a client telling me something that I don't necessarily agree with. And I'm like, well, at least like that is way better than having someone stand behind my back and tell me to like move it over to ficus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just not ideal for any sort of creative person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's making me think of like my internship days too, where it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like that. Ugh. But yeah, so whenever you first started Brighten Made, I feel like you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but were there any big, um, you know, things that you struggled with, like imposter syndrome, or just big things that were like really difficult for you to overcome?
Yeah, definitely. Imposter syndrome. And especially too, because I didn't really have any experience with ever really doing branding. Like just
Mm-hmm.
all I learned, like I said, was just from school. And so to like call myself that, I just was like, I don't know, like, and I also felt very like not sure about just the fact that like at one point when I was working through jobs, I'm like, people must think I'm insane. Like, I feel like that I don't want to look like the girl who like can't make up her mind on what she wants to do. But I like
Mm-hmm.
knew what I wanted to do. I just knew that I had to like do certain things to get there. Yeah. And then I think too, just like first starting out working with, from working with brides to working with business owners, it's completely different in like good and bad ways. And I think I also wasn't very confident in my design abilities, like from a branding perspective in the beginning. And so some of that attracted some clients that definitely like, I don't know, just didn't necessarily respect me because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
respect myself and my own skills. And so I think that led to a lot of just like learning and growth and yeah, just like putting yourself out there too. Like I said, like when you're in a partnership with someone, it's a lot easier to put yourself out there because there's someone else doing it with you. But when it's just
Mm-hmm.
you and like certain things don't work or certain things like just yeah, like you feel like you're failing, it's a lot harder I think to take in because it's just you. And so
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting over that mindset too and like realizing that like not everything is going to be perfect from the beginning and it's going to take time to like just develop like my process because like I totally made up like my process from the beginning. And I was like my first few clients, I'm like I feel so bad for them because that their projects probably took like 6 months, just because I like, and they didn't even know. And I think I told them in the beginning, like it's 3 weeks and then it was like longer than that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just kind of come like all the things with like figuring out and kind of making it up as I go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sucks because that's just kind of what you have to do. Like, I wish that you could just like, ideally you could take a course and you just learn everything immediately. But on some level, you just have to figure stuff out on your own a little bit by making mistakes. Um, and yeah, I totally, if I think back to like the first clients that I worked with, same, I didn't have like much of a process or anything. I was just kind of making it up. Or I read so many blog posts and stuff by other designers where they would talk about what
Yeah.
they do. And it was, just so much of like trying to think, oh, they do this, so I should do this. And then I would use it. And then I'd be like, oh, actually, that doesn't really work for me. And then I'd have to find something else. So yeah, just like lots of trial and error. And I feel like kind of like you said, where, you know, when you're just starting out and you're obviously like nervous and not super sure of yourself, you do kind of tend to attract clients that don't respect you or just kind of like I guess are more drawn to you because maybe they can tell that and they just want something that's cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that's kind of where they're going to get it from. Yeah, I totally had the same things happen. And I think of just how I presented myself to clients where, maybe they would make a suggestion and I would just do it, like do whatever they asked. Like I
Yes.
just didn't really, I don't know. Whenever I think of myself now, I obviously like stand up for myself more in those types of situations where in the beginning the client was always right. I would do whatever they wanted to make them happy because that was, in my mind, the only way they would pay me is if I just did what they want rather than like
Yes.
doing what they need. Yeah. So let's talk about design style because I feel like you're over the years you've developed like a really unique style. Anytime if I'm looking on Instagram or Pinterest or something and I see something of yours pop up, like I instantly know it's yours because I feel like your style is just super recognizable. And that's something that I know whenever I talk to really young designers, I feel like that's something that lots of young designers struggle with is figuring out what their style is.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you feel like has helped you find yours, or like when I'm sure if you would go and like look back at the early years, I'm sure your style is different as any designer's is. But yeah, like when do you feel like you found your style and like how did you find it?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think like one thing I do want to know is that I feel like my style, and I'm sure a lot of like pretty much every designer style is always evolving. And so while I do
Mm-hmm.
feel like I have like necessarily like landed on a specific style, I do feel like that style is always changing. Like even when I look at my work from a year ago to now, like
Mm-hmm.
I can see like changes in it. Even though it is, yes, definitely more in like one specific direction. But I think like just like with finding your style, it always starts with like just exploring different styles. Like for
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I really appreciate a lot of different design styles, but I naturally gravitate and create like one style, which is my style. And so I think as you like play around with more styles, you'll kind of realize like what you might be more drawn to, even though you might appreciate, a style that's completely different than yours. You still find yourself naturally kind of doing this other style like really well. And so I think that is when you kind of have to lean into that thing that you're really good at, because that's what's going to come most natural to you. And definitely like that's what's going to be more recognizable. I think oftentimes when we see like, because obviously like so many amazing, talented artists and designers and creatives. And a lot of times I think when we're first starting out, we're like, I want to be just like that. And it's hard because it's like you at the same time, like even if that is like a goal, and I think we can definitely still have like, goals and aspirations to like be like a certain look or style or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately like it has to come from like you. And so I think like you're never going to be able to fully like emulate like another person's style or a certain look if it's not like a natural fit for like what you
Mm-hmm.
would naturally do.
Yeah.
I kind of always relate it back to like when I was growing up, my parents and like we just built like a new house and I really wanted to paint my bedroom pink. And they were like, no, you're going to be sick of pink. Like, you have to paint it a different color. So I think I picked yellow. And then it was when I was like in middle school or maybe even elementary school. And then in high school, I was like, you guys, I still wanted a pink bedroom. And so then we finally changed it to like pink and like tan, which is so funny.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's still like something that I'm drawn to now. So I feel like, yeah, everyone definitely like has like certain like styles or colors or just different things that inspire them. And so kind of like trying to get to the core of that. And I think by doing that, by, practicing different styles and like getting creative and like figuring out, the projects that you love and the projects that you don't love. And especially to like curating that work. So like, I know in the beginning, like obviously I think we're all trying to like show that we have like I do diverse style. So we're like posting every different type of project possible, which I think is nice to show variety. Like it's always this balance between like, I can do different things, but I have a style.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want any like of my clients to also be like, well, it feels the exact same as, this past client. So I think it's like this balance of like, yes, I can do like different styles, but naturally, like I want you to hire me for the style that I'm good at.
Yeah.
And also like not be surprised, I guess, like
Mm-hmm.
with what you're getting. So yeah. but yeah, I think just like I said, just kind of like developing that style by like, practicing. And I feel like you're just going to get better over time, like the more and more that you do something. And so I think that goes, with anything, but especially with design. Like I said, if I look at my work from 2 years ago, I'm like, ah.
Same. I'm the same. It's crazy, like just how drastically my work has changed over the years, especially whenever I look at stuff from school. Like, oh my
Oh my
gosh, you would
goodness.
never even know that that was mine. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, I think that's all great advice. It is definitely, just like practice and testing things out. I feel like I always notice because I'm like you said, my style's still evolving. I do feel like now I've gotten like I don't know, it's kind of like the if there was a border around like all of the different styles that I've tried, it's getting smaller, like things are getting
Yes.
more focused, but it's not it's still got some room in there. um but yeah, I feel like every time I kind of like you said, like I'll see something that I'm like, oh, I really like that style. I kind of want my style to be more like that. And then I
Mhm.
always do some kind of like quick project just for fun, just as like an exercise to practice and see how it looks. And if it doesn't work, then that's
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, it's definitely yeah, creative practice that you have to do. And that's another reason why I feel like if I was working in an agency job, I feel like that is kind of stifled a little bit. I mean, of course, depending on where you work, but I think of like the place where I had an internship that was in a communications office, everything I created was the same, basically. It all had to follow, very strict brand guidelines. And so I didn't have a lot of opportunity to try out different styles. And so that's why I'm so glad that since I'm able to work with so many different types of clients, I naturally just like get to explore different stuff. Um,
Yeah, totally. And I think that was one of the big reasons why I didn't love working for a magazine, because like you only have like three like fonts to choose from. Like you have
mm-hmm,
to use these certain colors. And yeah, so I love, like, that's my favorite part about branding, is that you like there are endless possibilities. But yeah, at the same time too, I think it's just so fun to be able to like develop a style and like try something new. Like you said, like if you're like really inspired by something and just like quick, like trying it and seeing like if it's something that, I don't know, you want to like explore more of like that type of style, or like maybe it doesn't work, maybe you're not good at it and you're like, okay, I'm just going to admire this and not try to be like that. But it's hard because I think with designers, like we're always like probably like comparing ourselves to other designers and like wanting to like, like any sort of like visual things. I think to us, we're always like super excited to see, like, I just personally love to look at anything visual. And so
mm-hmm,
it gets me really inspired and excited. And then like, but at the same time, I think it can also do the opposite, where it can make you like question your own like style and abilities. And so that's when I always want like young designers to know, like, don't always like try to, I guess, compare, even though it's so hard.
mm-hmm.
Because it definitely like takes time to get to a specific style. And then also too, I think everyone struggles with it. I'm sure. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also feel like it hurts you whenever you get kind of so attached to just wanting to be
mm-hmm.
like one designer that you really admire, because I feel like I've noticed that sometimes where I see other designers, I can tell like who they're really inspired by or something, and I feel like it I don't know, you always have to try to make sure that you're pulling inspiration or like
Mm-hmm.
style inspiration, I guess, from multiple places so that it really is yours and not just you, kind of like you said, just trying to be like somebody else.
Yes. And it's
Easy.
not a healthy place to be either, I don't think. Cause like then you're always going to be like comparing yourself to that person if
Yeah.
like you are trying to like just be them. And it's never going to like, you'll always be second best to them because you're trying to be them rather than just like trying to be yourself, and like you can be the best at your style. And that's hard because like I said in the beginning, you don't know your style, and so you're looking for inspiration in all the places, and you can be super drawn to a certain designer style, and like that's just a natural thing to do. But yeah, I think it really helps too when you try to pull inspiration from other places, because I know for me, like I love to follow a wide range of designers, and I love to pull inspiration from like all different types of people who have different styles than me and kind of mesh that into like what is my style.
Thinking back to like whenever you were just starting, is there anything that you wish you would have known before you started Brighten Made, or like any big mistakes or something that you made that you wish you could have avoided?
Oh my gosh, so many.
Yeah, everybody has an endless list.
I mean, obviously, I think a contract was like one of my biggest things that I didn't have in the beginning. And that just got me into not the best place. Because the other thing too, when I did start having a contract, I did have at the time like clients that I still was working with on a consistent basis. And so I never like created a new contract for every new like project, because it might have been like something small or something that I just would do quickly. And even now I sometimes am like, oh, I forgot to set on a contract. But it is one of those things that like you do need to make sure that you are covered, especially with just like, I don't know, clients like not showing up or not giving you the items that you need or not paying you. And that unfortunately did happen to me at one point. I also have had clients who have fully disappeared. I had someone, still to this day blows my mind, paid me in full and then never did the project with me.
It's just like,
what?
Why?
I don't know. One thing I think I had to realize is that I can only be so motivated for them. Like at the end of the day, it's their business. And like my job is to cheer them on and to support them in the best way that I can, but I can't give them motivation for their own business. And I can't force them to do something if they don't want to better themselves in their business, then that's like out of my control.
Yeah.
It's because I think I used to take that stuff very personally. Like why would they not like try or, even respond or give feedback or like whatever it might be. And, some people just are different. And, that's also something that I obviously look out for now. But yeah, so I think obviously contracts was a huge thing. Another big thing that I think has really changed just like my business is timelines, and like very detailed project timelines. Just because in the very early stages, like I said, I would tell a client like, this branding will be about 4 weeks, but I had no idea how long it took. And so when it took like 5 times longer than what I said, it just was like embarrassing, one. And two, it was impossible to schedule new projects because I'm like, well, I have no idea when they're going to be done because it's just like, it never ends.
Yeah.
And I think especially just when you're first starting out, like your time is your money because it's so focused on, service. And so in order for you to be like efficient and profitable, you need to know like when clients are going to start and when they're going to end, in order to like just book clients and to actually like figure out like how much money you're going to make. Cause I think that was just something that I had no idea. And then it also helps the client stay on track. And so, I know like providing feedback or like giving like copy or images or whatever it might be, like those are big due dates for clients. And so I really try to stress those, like the importance of those in the beginning, and then also give them due dates for those things and like actually follow up with like repercussions if they're not done in time. Just because it totally ruins like my entire schedule, like not to sound dramatic, but it just
it does.
You can't
absolutely does.
You can't schedule any projects. I can't, like, it's impossible. And so like that has been my biggest workaround, is like very detailed, like day by day timelines. And I know some designers have them more loosely, and I just like that has been for me, like the biggest thing that I've found to work in my business, and just to be able to like book people out and think about like time, in the future. But yeah, those I would say like are my two big things. And then I think, just like kind of like we talked about, just like being yourself and trying to like, you know, focus on the things that like you're great at and the things that you love doing. And if it's not what another designer is doing, that's totally okay. We don't have to all do or offer the same services. And I think in the beginning, like I tried to really offer everything under the sun because like I said, I was just so nervous about making ends meet and making sure that like I could prove to myself that I could do this. And so, but then when I realized like, ooh, I don't like doing that. I think it took me a while to understand that like it's okay to say no, and actually you should say no. You need to protect what you say yes to. But also on the flip side, I do think sometimes there are designers where they'll like say no to, or they'll be saying no too soon in their business to a point where it's like you almost kind of have to go through some of the things you don't love doing, even if you've never tried it or you don't think you like it. Like I think at one point I did a brochure for like a car salesman. Like I'm not even kidding. So like not something that I necessarily wanted to do at the time, but I don't know if I feel like it helped me realize like the type of work that I love to do and the type that like is just not worth it for me. Because now I can stand very firmly in the things that I say yes to and the things that I say no to. And so I think it's okay to like take on things that maybe don't sound that great if you need to, and to also just get more practice because like if anything, I learned about working with a male entrepreneur and I never really worked with one before. So like just, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like there are so many mistakes and things that I could say, but those are just a few.
No, those are so good. I'm really glad that you brought up, I mean, obviously contracts are super important. And I feel like now more designers and creatives are like being more vocal about that because they're like, oh, I had some weird situations happen. You need to have contracts. But the timeline stuff, I feel like, obviously, I feel like lots of people suggest, oh, you need to set deadlines for stuff. But I feel like people don't talk about how horrible it can be when your timeline gets messed up, because that's something that I definitely didn't expect at all either. Like I assumed, of course I needed to know like when the project was going to start and end, but I didn't think of it as like a huge deal if the project got, a little bit delayed or something. But the most stressful times in my business are when projects were delayed and like overlapped. That's anytime that I've had like serious burnout, that's usually the root of it, because you're only one person and you can only do so much. And when all of a sudden things overlap and your workload is like doubled or tripled, it's just really hard to manage. And it's really hard to, once you let things get delayed, it's hard to like
Get them back on track.
Yeah,
It's impossible. Like
it's really difficult. And like you said, it is really hard to make clients understand that. And like you said, if it's just so strange because whenever a client reaches out to us and we like sign a contract, for us as the designer, like we're committed, we're going to make this project, go on track. And like, it's just really strange that like we're the ones who are committed and sometimes they aren't. But they're the ones who came to us. It's really strange. But there's definitely, I've had plenty of clients who like they reached out to me and they were great clients. They just weren't in a huge rush to get stuff done. and that can be a problem, but I can't force them to hurry up and finish their website.
Yeah. And I think though, like, that's why that was something that I really struggled with communicating in the beginning, because like you said, and a lot of small business owners, like they're busy. Like think about us, like we are busy. And so like, if we are taking on, this new thing or whatever, like I get it. Like, so that became really clear early on, because the difference was with when I was working with brides, like they were so adamant about having their stuff on time because they have a wedding, like they had an end
Mm-hmm.
date.
Yeah.
Like we knew everything had to be done by then. But with business owners, it's just this like never ending, it could happen in 3 years from now. Like, and that
Mm-hmm.
just like stressed me out, because there's just like, there's no way I can like plan my life around that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I felt like once I kind of figured out my entire process, I literally took it day by day and like step by step of like, okay, in between sending them their questionnaire to when I send them their brand strategy to when they need feedback by, to like when their website images are due, like I have it all mapped out. And there are still times when people do fall off the timeline because something happens or they get sick or whatever it might be, or we go over on revisions. Because
Mm-hmm.
I will say is a tricky thing about the timelines is, so I build out the timeline with the amount of revisions in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But some people approve it right away and some people might need an extra round. That's not like that often, but sometimes that does happen. And so
Yeah.
I do have to be flexible with myself in the sense where like things have to like kind of work around with that. But ultimately, just like I think for planning and for your own sanity and for ever being able to take time off, and to make a profitable business, like your time is your money. And so like if you
Mm-hmm.
can't know how many clients you're having at a given time and like when they'll be done, like it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I feel like that has been just like such an eye-opening thing, and still something that I still struggle with. I think that will always like be there, but at least
Yeah,
it's have
because every
somewhat of
client's
a
different.
system.
You
Yes.
can't anticipate what's going to happen. Like I feel like earlier this year I had lots of clients who were super like quick to respond, timelines were no problem, and then later in the year I ended up having two clients at the same time who both of them were just kind of like still good clients and they do still get back to me, but they just take a little bit longer.
Yes.
And so it's like I don't know, you have to take it project by project. Like have your ideal stuff, have your timeline planned out, and but you always have to be flexible as a business
Yeah,
owner, I guess. You just
totally.
have to be ready. And I feel like something that now I've just learned from my mistakes before, and now like whenever I'm scheduling out new projects, I never schedule a project back to back anymore. I always give at least a week or 2 weeks in between, just because
Mhm.
I have no idea what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And, you know, yeah, I just like I can't rely on the client to keep things on track. As
Yeah.
hard as I try, if I put, penalties or rescheduling fees and stuff in there, I don't know, you just never know.
Yes. No, I always feel bad too with like, I think I've only charged a rescheduling fee once, even though there definitely needed to be several more times. But I do try to kind of, I think if you're serious about like the penalties and like, I think bringing them up in the beginning, I think has also helped. So like usually on the phone, I'll tell them like you'll have your due dates, but then you also have to provide feedback. And the feedback loops are within 2 business days, which I feel like is a fair amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people still don't think it's long enough, but I think it's long enough, like 2 full business days. And sometimes that's over a weekend, which also
Yeah.
helps, or like a
Yeah.
holiday or whatever. And so usually for the most part, I think that's been good, but also just to remind them, like if they're not providing feedback on time, like as a reminder per my last email, I'm just kidding, but it's hard, but at the same time, like you said, like we can't control every little thing that happens in their lives and our personal lives, and so stuff does get messed up and you have to work around it. But at least having somewhat of a timeline that's a part of a contract from the beginning, I think is just like will protect you as a designer like so much.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that your business has been growing in lots of different ways over the past year. I know you've been hiring team members to work with you, and then also you've been doing stuff with like physical products. I know you designed some t-shirts, I think with like one of your past clients. Is that
Mhm.
right? And then you
Yep.
just did a print collection too. So what has that all been like? And like, has it been, have there been any challenges for like doing those types of things? I know transitioning from just offering services to selling products is like a big learning
Yeah.
curve, I feel like. So, yeah, I'd love to hear about all of that stuff.
Totally. Yeah, so hiring a team has been like, I think the biggest game changer ever. That was something that I was very, very nervous about doing just because I like to control everything. And also
Mhm.
because, I don't know, like, especially when I knew, sorry, my dog's like,
Oh, it's okay. I don't mind.
um, so yeah, I don't know. And then like when I knew that I wanted to hire like a project manager, I it was like in the middle of a pandemic and I was like, well, maybe I should wait in case business slows down. And then I finally was just like, at some point, like you just kind of have to go for it. But that has been like so helpful because now she does all of the project timelines and the contracts. And she's also able to then like adjust the timelines if they do need to be adjusted. And it's just better for scheduling and like just my own sanity, because a lot of times too, I think so much of our jobs involves like emailing and checking in with clients and like making sure they have everything they need and to get us what we need. And
Mm-hmm.
so having someone to do all of that has been amazing. um, she also helps a lot with my Pinterest, which before I would just like kind of pin on a whim, but I do get a lot of my clients from Pinterest. And so she has scheduled stuff every single week, which I think has just completely like so far, I feel like paid itself off. But yeah, and then I also hired a uh, designer who has been helping me, which is just super helpful for like if past clients come back and they want to add a page on their website or they want to maybe design packaging or something. It's just can be tricky to schedule that in with my like regular like branding
Mm-hmm.
clients because you always think those things are going to be really simple and easy, but they're not always. And they just take time. And so having someone to like handle some of that and then also occasionally take like a branding project or another big thing that she does that I hate doing, this was like the main reason why I wanted to hire a designer, was the final files. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally my least favorite thing I've ever done. So having her do those has been life changing. But yeah, I think just like finding the things that you don't love to do in your business and like outsourcing them is huge. And so that was like the thing I had in mind. But then she's also extremely talented. So that fact that she can also like design and not just do production work has been um, just amazing. So
Mm-hmm. And
yeah,
just
that's all.
curious,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to ask, how do you, for those two positions, like, do they work like a certain number of hours a month? Like, how did you handle that? Because I feel like that's always confusing to people whenever they're wanting to outsource someone, but they're like, how much should I, like, do I need to
Yeah.
hire them full time? Can they just work like a day a week or something? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so I started with the designer and I knew that like for sure she was going to do the final files and then like maybe like some smaller like collateral items, stuff like that. So I was thinking in my head around like 10 hours a week or so. So I included that on like the job posting, but the nice thing with that is that she's able to also take on more work. So if we have like all of a sudden a ton of work coming in, I'm able to still send her more things. She also like works for herself. So,
Mm-hmm.
but she's not actually in the US, she's in London. And so she is like a contract position because I
Mm-hmm.
can't hire part time if they're not in the US. And then for my project manager, that role I knew I wanted to also have around 10 to 15 hours per week. Um, and that was just me kind of guessing. Again, you don't know how long
Yeah.
like things take. And also I knew that there's going to be a learning curve with both of them. And it's going to take some time for them to get used to like how I operate and the things that they need to be working on and all of that. But I didn't tell either of them that like there's any sort of like hard like deadline or like hard stop time, I guess, with hours. So like if she
Mm-hmm.
hits 15 hours, I'm not going to say stop working.
Yeah.
If, you know, certain designers are worried about that, I mean, you could always cap it at a certain point or have them like maybe check in when they're like halfway through their hours, or like you said, maybe doing something like 1 day a week. I knew that with a project manager role, like that was going to be a job that needed to be pretty much daily because of emails. Because
Mm-hmm.
she helps a ton with my inbox, which again, just like game changer. I could not recommend it enough. But yeah, so that one I knew needed to be more frequently. And then I think too, just like both of them approached me, which is so crazy. Because I had actually hired, or I put up a job posting for the design position, but literally the night before I was about to post it, I got an email from this designer asking if I needed help with final files because she was freelancing for another company that was like switching over something. And so she was looking for more work. And so then it just ended up being a perfect fit. And I still posted the job, but then I ended up not even going with anyone who applied, which I felt bad after I posted it. But and then with the project manager role, I had mentioned something on my Instagram that I was looking for more help with that type of stuff. And some people like DM'd me and messaged me, and she sent me an email, and she actually made like a personalized resume and like told me how she could help me. And she's also local and has worked as a project manager before in like agencies. And so, yeah, it was just a really good fit. And I feel very lucky that like all of that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it can be very overwhelming to like go through applications and interview and, you know, hire that way. And so like, obviously if there's ways you can just find someone that would be a good fit, it's, you know, amazing, but also like you know, whatever works best. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I'm always interested to see how people handle hiring and outsourcing because it is an intimidating thing, especially when you're used to doing all the stuff by yourself for so long. You just get so
Mhm.
used to just being like, nope, I'm just going to do it myself. Nobody can do it the way I want to do it.
Yes.
um, but yeah, that's good to hear that it's like worked out that way. Um,
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, it obviously does take time. And I like, I told myself that going into it, because I actually, before I hired the designer, I had another designer who had reached out to me who I actually went to school with. And she had asked me if I need help with anything. And so I had her do some like final file stuff. Because like I said, that was the main thing I wanted off my plate. But that one didn't work out as well. And so I knew I wanted someone that was like more, I don't know. I think it's hard to also work with people that you know or knew or like are friends with or something. I don't know.
mhm.
So I kind of knew, because I even when I was thinking about hiring a project manager, some friends were like, well, maybe I could. And I'm like, yeah, but I like, it's just kind of, you almost want someone that you don't know so that like you can still um, treat them as like an employee and they can like feel that you are like the boss, even though
Yeah.
it's not going to be like bossy necessarily, but
Mhm.
just kind of having that sort of like work relationship. And then if it forms into a friendship, I think that's awesome. But just being able to like set those boundaries up, because I almost relate it back to like when we first had our first clients, when we didn't feel like a ton of like respect or confidence for ourselves. And like when I hired my project manager, I kind of was just like, I've never done this before. Like obviously. So I'm trying to like explain to her like my process and like, you know, ways she could help. And so yeah, I don't know. It's hard to be like confident about stuff like that when you've never done it before. But I also think it helps when, you know, like I said, you hire them and they know that like they're reporting to you, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's definitely, and I think it helps you just kind of feel more like the boss too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And not that I want to be like the boss necessarily,
Mhm.
because I think that was something I learned too early on about myself, was that I don't really like to tell people to like that they did something wrong or
Yeah.
like that they needed to fix something. And so, yeah, it's been kind of a learning process with all of that, and like, you know, figuring out like how to give feedback to them and helping them and guiding them throughout, all of this. And because, yeah, no one's ever going to get it right the first time, like just bottom line. And so telling myself that and like knowing that from the beginning has also helped me like not feel like disappointed or, whatever it might be. So.
Yeah. So is there something that you've done with your business that you're the proudest of? Something that you figured out, or like a client that you booked, or anything
Yeah.
that made you feel really proud?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like, hiring a team, I felt really, really proud about doing, just because that was like a big step for me. But I guess like client wise, I feel like this year I've gotten to work with a lot of like dream clients I never thought I would ever get, which has been just like amazing. Like, and I owe it all to social media. But yeah, just like getting some like the bucket list clients that like, when you first starting out, you're like, that's never going to happen. And actually like getting those like inquiries is just like, what? But yeah, so like this year, right now I'm actually working on a canned wine brand, which has been
Oh, that would be so
so
fun.
fun. And then I also did a coffee shop and a restaurant, which I like. Working on a restaurant has been like a dream from very, very early on, but I just like didn't know how to attract restaurants, and I still like would love to do more of them. I think it's because it kind of goes back to I love like the full like experience of a brand. So those ones have been super, super exciting. And then also just like baby clothing brands has been another thing that I had always wanted to get. And I've done a couple of them now. And I feel like the more you do clients like that, the more you attract clients like that. Because now it's like, now I feel like I work on baby brands all the time. But I remember when I first like really wanted a baby brand, and I was like, well, how do I get one? Because I don't have a child to like promote. But yeah, no, I feel like this year has been, I feel like a very different year, because I feel like I've been finally able to kind of look at my business in a bigger picture, rather than I think the years in the past, I was so focused on like just me and my services. And now I'm really trying to like think bigger picture of like, what do I want this to look like in 5 years? And like, how can I build something now that I can someday, take a maternity leave and be able to live and not just, be tied down to my computer everywhere I go. So obviously not there yet, but working on it.
Yeah, but it is kind of funny how I know whenever I started, and even through the first like few years, it's like I wouldn't allow myself to think that way. Like I felt like
Yes.
it was just a bad idea for me to try to think big picture with my business. Because like, what's the point in doing that? But yeah, it's just kind of interesting and like a good feeling whenever I don't know, you flip a switch or something and you're like, you know what? This can work. I can like build this to be whatever I want it to be. And yeah, it's just kind of
Totally. And I
you
think
got to go
like
through some stuff to get to that point. But
totally.
it's good
Yeah.
once you get there.
And I think early on in like, your business, you're so focused on the service-based side, and definitely still am, but like I also know that like I don't want to be tied down to just my time.
Yeah.
Like and I think I never really like I always thought of like money being my currency, and Jenna Kutcher says this, that like time is her currency. And so like that never really made sense to me until I don't know, something happened this year where I was like, wait, so I could maybe make money when I'm sleeping? Like someone could buy something from me when I'm sleeping? That is just like a concept I had never really fully understood. And I'm still figuring that out and, exploring with different things. But just knowing that like I would like to have a portion of my business not be so service based.
Mm-hmm.
Has just
And
been like a game
not so
changer.
reliant, not so
Yes,
reliant on you doing it, you doing
yes,
stuff to make
yes,
the money. Yeah.
exactly. So,
Yeah. So, last question, if there was one piece of advice that you could give young freelancers and creatives, what would it be? And that's always really hard. I mean, obviously, you've given tons of advice and you can pick any one of the things that you've already said. But yeah, if there's one thing, what do
oh
you
my
think it
gosh, so much. But I think it kind of goes back to like everything I feel like that I say would be super cheesy, but
is?
it's also so true. Like, I don't know, I feel like you have to just like lean into the things that you love and that you're good at. And if, it means putting yourself out there, like you have to just start and you have to just try, because you're not going to know if things like fail or don't work if you don't just like put yourself out there, just to see. And I think also too, like good things take time. Like it's hard sometimes to see, and compare yourself to people on Instagram or, other designers that you may admire. And it just doesn't happen overnight. Like,
Hmm.
as much as we wish that we could snap our fingers and it would all happen, like, it takes time. And so just like being consistent and staying motivated and not giving up after, a time when something didn't go the way that you had wished, or that you feel like you're still not there yet. Just because I think, the more that you can stay consistent with it, the more that it's going to like actually like happen and move the needle in your business.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's so good. I think the, like you said, when you're starting out, you just kind of compare yourself to all these different people and think, oh, they did this and that's how they became successful. So I should probably try to do that. But I feel like the people that I have followed and where I've seen their creative career like take off, it's always just been something like random that they would kind of just like do on their own. Maybe it wasn't really related to their client work, but it was just like something
mhm.
that they really loved. Like you said, just kind of leaning into the things that you love, where they said, okay, well, I do my client work, but I really love this style or something. And they
Yeah.
just kind of like dove fully into that, not knowing that it was going to turn into anything bigger, but they just kind of, yeah, dove into the thing that they really enjoyed about their work. And that's always like when all of a sudden all these opportunities started to like come to them, and all of a sudden they're doing more and more and more of that. And it just like, I don't know, I feel like I've seen that happen multiple times with different types of creatives, where it is just like, I don't know, they just they just find the thing, the style or the medium or whatever it is that like just makes them really happy. And that's
Mhm.
always when their career kind of starts to take off.
Yeah. And I think too, like if you, try to create more of the work that like you love doing, like that's how you're going to build like a business that like fulfills you,
Mm-hmm.
rather than feeling like you should do some certain type of design, but you're like not 100% sure. Um, and so I think, yeah, just like not being afraid to lean into it. And even if it's something that no one's necessarily ever done before, because I think sometimes it can feel scary to like
Mm-hmm.
try new things or offer something different or whatever it might be if like that's not the norm. Um, but I think that's okay, because like that's how you're gonna set yourself apart, and also just like find the thing that like, you're uniquely gifted at. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah, that's such good advice. Um, well, thank you so much, Bree, for doing
yes.
this. And I'm so excited for people to hear all of your advice. There were so many good nuggets of of wisdom in there. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've loved following you and just connecting with you over DM. So it's been fun to actually like I don't know, chat more than over however many characters are allowed in a
Yeah.
Instagram message.
Yes.